Today I want to talk about why I reject the theory that girls can be mature for their age and that women mature faster and earlier than men. But I really want to avoid age gap discourse, and it's kind of impossible to avoid age gap discourse when you're talking about both such an age and gendered issue like women being expected to mature faster or women being believed to mature faster than men. And the main reason I want to avoid age gap discourse is because, number one, that is a whole entire issue in and of itself that doesn't just have to do with lying to women that they're maturing faster or like convincing women that they're more mature than men and should look for older men. There are so many other videos on YouTube talking about age gap discourse, both from people who are in age gap relationships, from women who have left age gap relationships, and from women who've never even had age gap relationships. And as someone in an age gap relationship, I found that people really, really have an issue when you're very critical about age gap relationships while being in one that most young people and all of YouTube would deem to be an inappropriate age gap. I think as someone in a really big age gap myself, I have the experience and the observations to say I'm deeply suspicious of most age gap relationships where you have an 18 to 23-year-old woman in a relationship with some man over the age of 30. I'm deeply suspicious of all of them, and I think that most of them don't work. And people don't like hearing that from somebody in one of those myself. I don't think I'm special or better. I just think that it's really, really, really tricky for it to work out, and 99 times out of 100 it doesn't. But now that I've gotten that out of the way, I don't really want to talk about age gap relationships. I'd rather somebody else do that. The entire comment sections are going to be like, wait, you're in an age gap, like, it's a really inappropriate age gap. I'm talking about women and maturity. So, to begin with, I just want to say from the beginning, I don't like terms like maturity or mentally 13 going on 30, any of those age phrases. I don't like phrases being used like that, or at least I don't like them being taken literally. I'm probably the only one who takes them literally. But, phrases like saying that some disabled adults have the brain of a 2-year-old or the brain of a 6-year-old, I know that's not literal, and it's usually meant to refer to to visualize the capabilities that a disabled adult might have, but still, a 38-year-old man with very severe autism doesn't have the brain of a 7-year-old. He has the brain of a 38-year-old man with severe autism. Even if he has, the needs, and is only as independent as a 7-year-old may be, he's still somebody with 38 years of life and has therefore had, decades of experience upon said 7-year-old that his brain matches. But anyways, now that I've just talked about my issue with phrases like that, just people being mature for their age, immature for their age, mentally this, that, whatever. And yes, I am guilty of saying I am mentally 13. I have said stuff like that. Again, I am no better. I just don't like that in general. I want to talk about, first, what is maturity? Why do we think that girls mature faster than boys? I think if you talk to most people, men and women, they would say, women mature faster, women tend to be more mature, yada yada. What is that, and why do people think that? So, I looked up the definition of mature, and there are two definitions. The first one is being fully physically developed, and I'm going to stop on that for just a second before I get to the second definition. It is kind of universally known that girls start developing earlier than boys do, but it's usually only by a margin of 1 or 2 years. And using that logic, if we're going to say that it biologically makes sense for age gaps to exist, they shouldn't be more than 1 to 2 years. A 30-year-old man should not be dating an 18-year-old girl because they have both developed at the same rate. They haven't. It could also refer to the false belief that women fully develop earlier than men do. And that's simply not true. There are a few measures for why someone would believe this. One is men tend to continue growing after 18. Not much, but like a lot of men tend to grow after 18. Women have usually stopped growing by this time, but both men and women are still filling out a bit after 18, and I do consider that to be a part of being fully developed because, while lots of adults can be very thin, a skinny teenager who doesn't have any arm or leg muscle or fat does not look like an adult the same way that a 20-year-old who has, fully fleshed out torso, arms, and legs, or full muscles all over his body, they don't look the same. A 17-year-old usually doesn't look the same as a 20-year-old. Sometimes it's hard to tell. I'm not saying that from my perspective. I'm just saying I get why some people have a hard time telling, but it's usually pretty easy to just discern the difference between like a 16, 17-year-old and a 20-year-old. Like a lot of gooners at this point have already lost attraction to 20-year-olds because they consider 20-year-olds to be obese for having a healthy fat distribution for a grown woman, but that is beside the point. A lot of, especially men, but a lot of people seem to think that once a girl has her first period, she is fully developed enough to have a child. I mean, just because she can give birth to a child doesn't mean she's fully developed in the slightest. Most women, or most girls, still are growing at least 2 years after they have their first period, and they are by no means having a fully developed body or look like an adult, especially because a lot of girls are starting to have their periods at 8 or 9 years old. We can't start calling 10 and 11-year-old girls grown women at this point. I know a lot of people would like to, but they really aren't. And the people who want 10 and 11-year-old girls to be considered fully grown women aren't actually into fully grown women. So again, this thesis that women develop earlier than men do is untrue. We develop at roughly the same rate, and we are physically mature at roughly the same rate. And the idea that women are either develop much earlier or are fully developed earlier is untrue. And, again, with the, women being able to physically give birth at 9, 10, or 11 years old, where is the same standard being held for 11, 12-year-old boys who are fully capable of being dads at this age? The energy isn't matching. It's not because women want fertile men. It's not because men want fertile women. It's because predators want children to take advantage of. Okay. So that's physical maturity. When it comes to mental maturity, being mature is defined as being able to handle life's complexities in a healthy way. And I just want to say this, when have you ever seen an 18-year-old girl handle life's complexities in a healthy way? I can't tell you how many, first of all, as an 18-year-old, when I was 18-year-old, I'm 21 now, but when I was 18, 18-year-old girls I know, they are crazy. They are not making rational decisions. It's not because they're emotional women. It's not because they're dumb. It's because I've never met an 18-year-old who wasn't a kid, who didn't, talk, think, and act like a kid, what I would think a kid would act like. And it's because just because they have the word legal slapped to their age doesn't mean they're magically acting like fully developed adults who have a mortgage and are thinking about taxes. Most 18-year-old girls still live at home. A lot of 18-year-olds are still in high school. Most 18-year-old girls are maybe starting their first year of college, live in a dorm, live with roommates. They haven't had their first job yet. They might not own their own car. If they are driving, they're probably using something from their parents. They didn't buy their own car. But again, these are just averages and showing you that 18-year-olds are still kids. And that's not even going into, if you try to have a conversation with an 18-year-old, you're having a conversation with what feels like a well-spoken kid who's just very naive and hasn't experienced most things in the world. And that's mental maturity. So even in regards to mental maturity, I don't think most 18 to 21-year-old girls are mentally mature. I still think that men and women in their late teens and early 20s are still making irrational, emotionally driven decisions that a kid would make because they're not fully grown, fully developed adults. So now that we've talked about what maturity is, and again, why I don't think that, like, women are mature for their age, or honestly, that women even can be mature for their age, that anyone can be mature for their age, let's talk about what a mature for her age girl may look like. So the first couple of things I want to talk about are adultification and parentification, which are both pretty similar. Adultification is when adults push adult responsibilities onto a child, like cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids, getting a job, doing taxes, or like filling out forms. It tends to happen in more low-income households or low-income single-parent households where the oldest child or the oldest children are expected to take on more arduous decisions that most kids at this age either don't have to or shouldn't be taking on. And this can lead, say, an 18-year-old girl to feel like she has the life experience of somebody in their 30s, and then feel like I don't want to talk about age gaps, but like it can lead, an 18 to 21-year-old girl thinking she's mature for her age and having a hard time relating to her 18 to 21-year-old peers. She knows what it's like to fill out mortgages, to fill out tax forms, to fill out official forms in general, to fill out like medical bills or whatever. And people her own age are super irresponsible with money, aren't able to communicate their needs when this child has had to do so from a very early age. So adultification can lead to a very, very young adult feeling more mature and very much out of place with her own peers. Another term is parentification, which is when parents it's more concentrated than adultification, but it's when parents force their oldest child or oldest children to take part in the child rearing because the parents are too irresponsible or neglectful to do so. Parentification is under the umbrella of child abuse, and again, the results of parentification and adultification is young adults who have a hard time relating to other people their own age because they were subjected to more responsibilities when they were younger. But the issue with this is that much older adults will look at what appears to be a more responsible 18-year-old and then take advantage of somebody who actually is more vulnerable because of their traumatic childhood or their past where they let adults walk over them and adults force responsibilities onto them. A parentified or adultified young adult is more vulnerable to abuse and being taken advantage of and manipulation by much older adults that this young person thinks they are mature enough to handle. Another reason that girls might be considered mature for their age is if they're simply well-read. This is the category I fall into. When I was a tween and a teenager, I read a lot, and I read a lot of articles, I read a lot of fiction, I read a lot of classical literature, and by the time I was 18, I had a wide range of interests in cultural, political topics, media, fashion, history, old technology, vintage, things in general. And because of that, somebody really, really close to me thought I was mature for my age, simply because, as I put it, I knew big words. I don't know if anyone saw my review of Miller's Girl, but this is so relevant because Miller's Girl is about a legally adult high schooler who has this weird affair with her 50-something-year-old teacher. And he claims that she's mature for her age, when as I'm watching it, I'm not seeing a mature teenage girl in the slightest. I'm seeing a very immature 18-year-old girl who wants to stir up some drama, who just simply knows big words. That's her only claim to maturity. And I was in that category, and I feel like a lot of autistic girls might relate to this, because, we echo things more and we pick up on things more, and we might be better with words and memorizing words and such. And we may still be very emotionally immature and, again, still subject to manipulation and being taken advantage of, because an older adult thinks we are more mature for our age when we're not, just because we know some big words. That can look like a lot to some really, really dumb or predatory grown-ups. The last reason why even some women themselves might think they're more mature than other women is if they desire a long-term relationship or a nuclear family and settling down between the ages of maybe 18 and 21. There are so many, some of them might even be considered pick-me girls, but there are, a lot of girls who are between the ages of 18 and 21 might think that because they want to settle down, unlike their peers, that they're not only more mature than their fellow women, but also better than them, and the other women are like whores who just want to party. And they also think that because they want to settle down, and most men that age don't, they need to find older men. And desiring a long-term relationship and settling down isn't necessarily a mark for maturity. While older adults tend to be more likely to want to settle down, that doesn't mean that older adults do want to settle down or want to be less promiscuous than young adults. And besides, there are lots of young men, if you are a young man looking for a long-term relationship, you're probably looking at all the girls around you and being like, why are all the girls such floozies? None of the girls my age want to settle down. It's so hard to find a girl who wants to settle down. But young people really struggle to find other young people who want to settle down because most young people don't. That's not a marker for maturity. That's just a preference. Personally myself, I didn't really want to go around dating a lot of different people and having a long line of exes before I settled down. I much prefer to have one really serious relationship with one person forever, and I don't want to mess around before finding that. I'd rather my serious relationship be that from the beginning. I've seen a lot of women who want to settle down and also, that's not me, but also have a more traditional relationship where they're living at home with their children and raising their children, and their husband is working, and it's just a very traditional nuclear family. They're also consuming a lot of content that says they're very rare and unusual for doing this, and the feminists hate them, and they're not like other girls, and this is also generally the same media that encourages women to look for older men and men to look for younger women. So a lot of these girls are, buying the propaganda that they're mature for their age when they're actually not. And also, the whimsical idea that you could just find a rich, financially stable older man as an 18-year-old girl is a very immature thought to have. Most of my 30-something and 40-something friends, well, they can't afford to live on their own. They're not necessarily financially stable and still living from paycheck to paycheck. And again, having a preference for settling down and having a long-term relationship at an early age does not make you mature for your age. And it can subject you to vulnerable situations because much older men looking for barely legal women are specifically looking for a legal child that they can take care of and raise and mold into exactly what they want and give as few freedoms as possible. All that is to say, I really reject the premise that just anyone can be mature for their age, and especially girls, because it feels like propaganda to convince much older men that it's okay to date really vulnerable kids who are legal but haven't developed the ability to set boundaries and communicate their needs and stand up for themselves. It feels like propaganda to convince women to seek out or be content with predatory dynamics. And that's why I really want to get to one of the roots. There are a lot of issues going on here, and I really don't want to focus on age gap relationships, but one huge root is women being told they can be mature for their age, or girls being said to be mature for their age.